So like previously we were dealing with React, right? So um, we only so we haven't started React with JSX, right? So we studied how React works in line, and we also saw some other different methods, and basically we is this my live one or my live, right? Just let me check whether my stream is up. Yeah, so basically we have dealt with React using create, right? So we were using React, but then um we were using React dot create element to create an element, right? So we have yet not seen how JSX works, right? Or we haven't seen JSX like syntax, right? So we are yet ready to see that, right? So so basically in previous sessions we created a React project, but then there we were so we were using the root the way React is defined, right? So we were doing React dot create element, and this is to create our element, and then we used to manually add React, right, DOM, right? So we used to do React dot adding element to the DOM, right? So we used to do this manually, right? So um now what we are going to introduce is this is basically how inbuilt it is inbuilt everything is going to be working like this, right? But then um we don't want to use React this way, right? We want to use React, but then we want JSX. We want to use React, but then we don't want to directly write React dot create element, right? So in the last chapter, we looked at how the virtual DOM is a set of instructions that React follows when creating and updating a user interface. Now these instructions are made up of JavaScript objects called as React elements, right? So basically, we saw what React elements are, right? Um, we saw React elements. Now these instructions, so far we learned two ways to create elements using React dot create element and using factories. An alternate to typing out. This is very verbose, right? You need to mention the entire thing, right? Basically, you need to mention React dot create element, right? So this is a bit verbose as compared to um this is a bit verbose, right? Because like we don't want we don't want to use this, right? So now what we would be doing this, we would be developing an alternative way to use this, that is basically using JSX, right? So then the JSX is basically an JavaScript extension that allows us to define React elements using syntax that looks similar to HTML, but it is not exactly HTML, right? So we are basically going to use JSX. Now this is basically HTML like syntax, but it is not exactly HTML, right? So we are going to use this JSX to define and to work with and to construct the virtual DOM. Now React elements as JSX. Now so this Facebook was the Facebook's React team released JSX when they realized React to provide a concise syntax for creating DOM element trees with attributes. They also hope to make React more readable, like HTML, XML. Now in JSX, an elements type is defined with a tag. The tag attributes represent the properties. The element children can be added between the opening and the closing tags. We can also add other JSX elements as children. And then if you have an anomaly, for example, we'll see how we are going to create that JSX like syntax, right? Um, now there are certain key advantages. First is basically as it is like HTML like syntax. Um, so remember, it is more readable, right? The It is going to be more readable. Secondly, if it's readable, then and then um, the other way is JSX and elements type is, so we are going to use your make use of tags, right? The tag attributes. So then the tag attributes are going to be the tag attributes are going to represent properties. Basically, tag attributes are going to represent properties, right? Okay. Now, JSX works well with components as well, as it is more legible and easily understood. Uh, okay, let's move little bit. Let's have this. Yeah. Now, let's go back and check. Now, for example, JSX like syntax. Okay, we'll see that thing. When we pass the array of ingredients, okay. Now JSX step. Now JSX might look like similar. Most of the like HTML, however, there are a few considerations that we need to understand with JSX. Now, the JX allows you to add components as a children of the other components. For example, inside ingredient list, we can render another component called as ingredient multiple times. Now, since okay, now what we are there are certain rules like in uh okay. So first is basically so the rules while using JSX. Okay, the first rule states that uh, if it's a nested component, uh, nested component can be added only inside a tag. So, like it should be present inside. No, it should be so nested component can be added only inside another component. That means there should be a parent component that is going to be there. So when we do nesting, basically what we are doing is we are going to add components as children of other components. So let's see one example, right? So for example, this is my ingredient list, right? Suppose this is ingredient list. Now I can nest in components as much as possible, right? If you don't, there should be a parent tag that is going to have the nest name to be um, there should be a parent, it should be present in a parent component if it's a nesting. Now since then we have something called as class name. So class name is used to define the class as attributes, right? So then next thing is we use class name class name to define as class attributes. Now JavaScript expressions. Now JavaScript so then what we can do is we can write JS inside curly braces. So you can have a curly braces and then you can write any JS code can fit in over here, so that is not a big issue. Okay. Um the values of types other than string should also okay. For example, when we do so like it's mostly like HTML, right? So you can have, for example, if you're having a checkbox, you can have type as well. But okay, now the JavaScript that is added in between will get evaluated. This means that the operations as concatenation or addition will occur. This also means that functions found in JavaScript, okay, we can invoke them. It should be read. Okay, so what you can do is you can have a this is a JSX tag, and then inside this, what you can do is you can mention your JS in curly braces, and then again close this tag. So this is one very good feature, right? Inherently it supports JSX, right? So we can do mapping of arrays to JX as well. That means uh, what we can do, um, we can map array to JSX. But then remember, whenever we do mapping, right? The most important thing is in because the diffing algorithm needs to work, right. So a unique key needs to be assigned whenever we have similar elements. We need to assign them a unique key. The reason for this is this unique key is an identifier for the diffing algorithm that is running behind, right. That is going to distinguish between how JSX is going to react with sorry how the diffing algorithm is going to only re-render only that part of the element which is being changed, right. So it needs a mapping for that. Now JSX looks clean and HTML, but it can be interpreted with the browser. All JSX must be converted to a create react. Okay, but then there is a problem, right. So our React live or framework will need React dot create element, right. So there should be some way for us to have this JXX being converted to this type. So we need to convert JSX to React dot create element, right? We need to convert JSX to React dot create element. Like the inherently inside there should be some mechanism for us to do that, right? So that is provided by a Babel. So for that we have a very excellent tool called as uh, Babel, right? So Babel does that job of converting our JXX to React dot create element. Now Babel. Now most of our so let's learn about Babel. Now most so before we go like just let's try to revise little bit more rules uh, of JSX so that uh, like later on because we will be using JSX a lot, right. So before going on to Babel, let's see some more core rules of um, core rules of JSX and why they are okay. Okay, so first thing that we do is instead of using class, we'll be using class name. So instead of class we have class name now. Now for DOM attributes, um, we need to use for DOM attributes we need to use camel casing. So whenever you are dealing with DOM attributes, it's mandatory for us to have a camel case being used there. The next thing that we have is now JSX must be wrapped in one expression. That means if you are nesting elements, then you should they can only be for example, if you create a JSX element, right? Um, so like, is this the what? Oh, wait, yeah, third is JSX needs to be wrapped in a single single element in one expression. Okay, let's say in one expression. Then so JS, okay, then if you need to write JavaScript, right? So JS inside JSX can be written using curly braces, right? So anything inside curly braces is said to be JSX. Okay. Uh, Now self. Okay. Now if it's a self closing tag, then I have point number 4. So self closing self closing tags must end with slash. It's mandatory. Okay. Now component. Now this is something. Okay, we said that componentization is one of the major feature of React, right? So componentization is a very important feature, right? So if you are writing a component, uh, then component must always start with component must always start with capital letters. The reason we are doing this is because we have JSX, right? So JSX will be in small case, right? To distinguish between capital case and small case, we need to do that. Okay. And the comments inside. So then, if I need to write a comment, so uh, comments inside JSX will be written using like to if you need to write a comment, then this is how you write a comment, right? You have a closing and then an open. Okay. And so if you're trying to map JSX, like I don't know, 7, so mapping JSX um give a unique key value, right? We need to have that unique key value um, for similar elements. So when we are going to map it, we are going to do like mapping will be changing an element to one, right? So that is most important. One of the major features is we need to return uh, one parent element, right? Let's see, like why do we need to do that? Like what's the uh, I mean, what's the compulsion? Why does JSX need one parent return? Okay, now okay, let's see if we what happens when we don't return a single parent, right? So if we do a return, so like I have hello, and I'm going to close this, and then I have a p tag here that is going to be world. Now this entire thing is going to get converted to So we are going to convert this to react.create element, right? So the moment we do react.create element, what will we how will be doing is react dot. Now there are three identifier. First is basically indicating the tag, right? So then is my h1 as a string. Then is going to be my content, I guess. Or then is where I'm going to attach, and then the third is going to be my content. This is how it is going to get converted to internally. Same goes for p tag, right? So then again, p tag also will be react dot. Then I have a p tag here, and then the last is basically going to be my world, right? This is going to be how my HTML content is going to be present, and then I'm going to have a null, right? So this is basically indicating where I'm going to attach that tag. JSX must return one root node because React component can only return one value. The virtual DOM React's internal representation of UI must have a single root per con. Returning multiple sibling elements without a parent causes ambiguity. Uh, Now this is not going to work because React expects a single element to return from a component, right? Now internally, so what we are doing is instead of having we are going to, the way React is defined is we only need to have one single element. These are two different, right? So then React expects only a single element to be returned from a component. Now JSX must return one root node because so because the way React has been defined is all all React components can only return like React components should only return one node, can only return one value. Uh, the reason is this is how React is made internally. I mean, it's internally it will only expect one. Now the virtual DOM must have a single. So React's internal representation is so the virtual DOM. This is not the actual DOM, right? So the virtual DOM, that is React's DOM. This is the DOM created by React, right? Now it must have a single root for component, right? Single root. It expects a single root per component. Returning multiple siblings without a parent. So if I have multiple siblings, then I will be creating ambiguity, right? So returning multiple siblings creates ambiguity. So these are the some of the important rules that we need to be aware of, right? When before we are um, going to write React. I mean, before we are going to use JSX to have our components built in. Now let's see Babel. Now most software most languages allow us to compile our source code JavaScript in interpreted languages. The browser interprets the code as text, so there is no need to compile JS. However, not all browsers support ES and ES6 and ES7 syntax, right? And no browser supports JSX. Since we want to use the latest features of JS along with JSX, we need a way to convert a fancy source code into something a browser. So yeah, now the problem what happens here is, so okay, let's go back to our client server architecture. Okay, let's have, this is our client server model. The client is going to send request to the server, right? And the server is going to respond. Is going to send back the response. This is my client, right? So I have my client, and this is my server. Now On client side, I'll be having a browser that is going to be run, right? This is my browser. Now see, this browser can only understand three things. Either it can understand HTML, or either it can understand CSS, or either it can understand JS, right? So if it's not able to understand anything that is written other than this, will be the browser will not be able to interpret it, right? So hence we need to make, so your JS is, if you see in this list, there is no JSX present, right? So JSX needs to be transpiled to something which the browser can interpret. Transpiled to something browser can understand. So for that we use something called as a transpiler, or one of the ways to do it using Babel, right? So Babel does that job. Now, so now let's see how Babel does it. Babel is basically a JS compiler that converts the modern modern JavaScript, that is ES6 plus and JS, into older JavaScript that all browsers can understand. So basically, first is okay, now this is common JS, right? So common JS is a very old version of JS, right? So right now, we are using something called as ES6. One of the major features, I mean, like one of the major tasks will be to have this JXBX being converted into something which the browser can understand. I feel like modern browsers do have support for ES6 plus and syntax, but then um, I feel modern browsers have the support. It's just for the JS things to parse that um, JSX to something that can be understood. We do that. Um, we use Babel, right? So yeah, modern browsers can support the major features of ES6 plus. But the more important thing is not about it's not about JavaScript. It's about JSX. So we want the JSX thing to work smoothly, right? Modern browsers do support modern JavaScript, or like the ES6 one. Okay, the next thing we need to understand is, so basically Babel is nothing but a transpiler that does this does this conversion for us. So Babel is a transpiler that performs the conversion for us. Okay, the next thing that we have is so like after Babel we have something called as a Webpack. Now what is a Webpack? Let's see some little bit about Webpack. A Webpack is a module bundler. It takes a code and bundles it into a small number of optimized output files, just only a few ready for the browser. So what we are going to do is, so it's going to, Webpack is going to it's a module bundler. Basically, the job of this webpack is to bundle our small files. For example, you might have a different file for HTML, you might have a different file for CSS, and then you might have a different file for JavaScript, right? So all of these files are going to get bundled into one single file, or um, it will bundle into one single file so that browser can render them efficiently, right? This is the job of a mod. So like there are various there are various different types of module bundlers that we have. Mm, okay. The first module bundler we have is Webpack itself. Um, this is the OG one, or the one that was first introduced. Later on, we came to something called as White, right? This is again a very important bundler that works. Then, okay, we have something called as White. It's a modern and a fast way to do. Then we have some other roll ups. These are basically additional JS libraries. We have something called as roll ups. Okay. Then we have parcel. Again, one of a very good and a very commonly used bundler is parcel. Then you have something called as parcel. Again, the name suggests what it is going to do, right? Then we have um, something called as ES build. Again, so like, why do we need Webpack and React? I mean, like, why are we trying to bundle the modules? Like, what if we don't bundle them? Like, what if we already have Babel? Oh, so now this is how the folder structure of JS is going to work. Okay. Now the main feature of uh yeah, so that bundling is okay. Now one of the major features of React is doing componentization, right? That means if this is our web page, so what we will be doing is we'll be defining our web page into different components, right? For example, this could be my header component. Then I have my footer component. then I have my main page or other components, right? So what I would be doing is we would be writing these components into different files, and then we are going to make them to be imported to our main React file, right? So we need some way to have that. Um, but at the time of running, running the code, we don't want to look and search for every import, right? We need them all to be bundled and ready to be combined at runtime, right? For this purpose, we use something called as a bundler, because we are going to make multiple import, right? So we are going to say import the header component from some file. So we are going to do import header, then we are going to use it some file name, and we are going to import say footer. I'm writing footer, and then this will be again from some file, and then so during runtime, like we should have these resolved already, right? It shouldn't be at runtime that we are checking whether have we made the import from the correct location, have we done it from, have we imported from, have we given the correct path. So all these needs to be resolved previously and should be bundled, right? So then if you don't do this, then we will need to track them, like track each of the imports manually. This is going to become a difficult task, right? Tracking everything is going to be a headache, right? And we don't want us to do the tracking. We want let the React do the tracking. So then whenever we are going to run anything like React, we are going to have a webpack or a bundler that is going to uh, do the job, right? Okay. And now we haven't seen how to create a component in JSX, right? So components are nothing but functions. Um, okay, this is something that we need to understand. We need some mechanism by which we can create a component in JSX, right? Okay, so the way we are going to write, there are two ways to create components using JSX. So we saw how to write JSX, and let's see creating components in JS, because we said componentization is a very important part of React, right? Now we are going to do creating um, We are going to do creating components in React. And there are two methods to do this. First is basically you make use of functions. The second way to do this is make use of arrow functions, right? So basically you make use of um, the second way to do is basically making use of um, arrow functions. Now let's see how we are going to do it using functions, right? For example, this is our function. Um, this is like creating a component. So you have a function, and then you have a function name. Now the whole idea is the return has to be a single parent, right? We need to have a single JSX like thing that is going to be present. So the moment we do it, we need to have a single element being returned. So yeah, so this is going to have a return statement present here, and we are going to do a single parent return. Now, what if you don't have anything that is a single parent? So you can use something called as um, React dot fragment, or you can use let's see what does that do. So what when we do okay, so there are two ways of React dot fragment. Either you just so what is it is going to do is now this is not going to be present in our HTML code, but it is still just go. So whenever we transpile trans transpile it to our after transpilation, like this would be it would be redundant, right? This wouldn't be present in our like instead of using a div as or something else as a single parent, there you can use this or you can just write in React dot fragment. The simpler way is using open and close tags, or else you can use React dot fragment as well. So this will not get added. The React transpiler knows that these needs to be ignored. It's just for since we are returning multiple elements. Now the disadvantages of using this, we cannot use keys over here. So you cannot loop and have a multiple parent thing. But if you are using React dot fragment here, you can have keys. So this is one advantage. We can not use keys on shorthand. However, you can use keys when you are in when you are using React dot fragment directly. Okay. I guess yeah. That is all for a brief introduction about JSX, Babel, and Webpack. We'll see how to use them, and we'll see with what do we need to do, states and props. We'll see that in the next lecture. So yeah, that's all for this one. I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Till that